Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Anyone ever tried sketching references from their recurring PTSD flashbacks?
Today in /dad/shitpost thread news, announce LARP as 20th century fishermen instead of teenage shut-ins who will likely never do any real labor in their lives.
Not too far off. In December 2005, we were sailing a Hunter 33 from Virginia to Florida and got ass blasted by a nor'easter. I'm thinking of doing a whole series of PTSD flashback paintings from my teenage years. Got getting my mask ripped off 90 meters underwater inside of an upside-down tanker ship in the St. Lawrence River. Got my being in my dad's first plane crash in Pennsylvania. Got my dad driving off a cliff in West Virginia. Got me skiing off a cliff in Killington. My dad got vertigo while we were diving off a light tower. Boat crash. Almost a boat crash that is for some reason more haunting now. Dad's friend shooting his finger off. My car crashed in West Virginia. My car crashed in Virginia. The time I broke someone's face up with my elbow, but their tooth cut my elbow and it got super infected in 24 hours. Time I got my face broken up in HS. Some of you bozos weren't children of a psychopath thrill seeker that did crazy reckless shit constantly, and it shows. I mean, that's the craziest thing about having actually done a bunch of crazy shit. You just assume nobody will believe you and think you're a liar, so you just keep it to yourself. Like my dad's funeral was crazy because it was just an endless procession of people that had experienced the most traumatic thing in their lives while hanging out with him, and I would remember what they were talking about and wouldn't even be in my top 10 from that year. Also, my dad was almost certainly the Colonial Parkway killer, since I'm doing an anonymous therapy session. Was targeting women that looked like my mom every time she was pregnant. Switched MOs to inviting couples out on the boat and going out of the bay to do target shooting. Killed the man, assaulted the woman and killed her, threw their bodies in the ocean and marked the spot on the GPS with their initials, which I discovered when we giving the dog a burial at sea. He would take the boat out alone later at other times and kind of drift around on top of the pin, doing whatever. After his crash, I took his GPS and flight logs to the FBI and gave them a DNA sample for the hair from the Colonial Parkway killings, and at first they were stoked but then clammed up hard. Likely because my dad also did freelance spook work at Camp Perry for the CIA developing neurofeedback conditioning, and that was why he was always around Colonial Parkway in the first place. But hey, nobody believes me, so I can fucking say it whenever I want and it doesn't matter.
September 5, 1989, was the last time there was a murder there. Each murder besides the first one was once every year for 3 years until it suddenly dropped. My question is, did your dad die in 1990?
No, he got divorced and had more travel and alone time. Could fuck off for weeks at a time. First murders also likely happened in Western New York. He went to William and Mary, which is on Colonial Parkway, for his doctorate. One of the victims in the first couple was taking psychology undergrad classes when he would have been there. And she looked like a clone of his wife, my mom, who he had a weird obsessional love-hate thing towards forever, particularly because she kept having miscarriages and he blamed her for it. Other murders. He had a business partner in his neurofeedback software company that was doing contracting work at Camp Perry who was found hanging from a swing set at a school playground where my dad would have had access to as a school psychologist at the time. Someone near a snowshoe in West Virginia in like 1999 maybe. Someone in Key West in 2012. Salt Lake City in 2005. He marked in his flight logs on 3 of the days the Colonial Parkway killings happened hangar time and an X, and then his day books when he was traveling to ski places. In the 1990s and early 2000s, or Buffalo or Key West would be mostly just blank with vacation written down it except for random times. where it'd either say hanger time or some other hanging pun with an X. Including one time when I was with him in Salt Lake City and he disappeared all night. Also had terabytes of fake snuff and extreme bondage and hanging rhymes with corn on him in the crash and in his office. Also straight up drunkenly said a few times during arguments that he had killed people, which seemed like a liar trying to be intimidating at the time. Oh, also drunkenly confessed and bragged about how in his neurobiology graduate program he experimented with making meth and LSD, and depending on when he told the story he either accidentally caused an OD because he was an idiot or intentionally caused an OD of an idiot that was threatening him. I don't know though, probably a goof.
Reading these made me nauseous. I lived in Williamsburg, the town where the College of William and Mary is located, and I witnessed and participated in a bunch of weird shit in high school. Seeing someone that I don't know acknowledge the funky shit that happens around that area is really weird. I'm happy to greentext or write them up if there's interest. I've been meaning to for a while. Just to preface, I think Williamsburg has a lot of weird shit going on due to a number of factors. It's old as fuck, former Indian territory, and it's close to Camp Perry, CIA base. I'm going to try to go through things in chronological order, but I'll save some of the especially weird ones for the end. The earliest, explicitly weird memory I have from Williamsburg happened the year my family moved there, so early middle school for me, and was fairly benign but definitely weird. We were dicking around in Colonial Williamsburg, which is the historical section of town. Bunch of old buildings and people in costume yelling at you for dressing in odd attire. My father and I had gone into one of the larger buildings, that wasn't regularly visited by tourists, to look around. I went to the second floor of the building while my father remained on the first. Going up the stairs I heard what sounded like a woman lecturing or giving a presentation, so being a nosy bastard I went to investigate. Despite my best attempts to channel the spirit of Sherlock Holmes, I couldn't pinpoint where the voice was coming from despite checking every room I thought it could have come from. It seemed to bounce from room to room, evading me. Eventually I got spooked by this and went to find my father, who claimed to have heard the voices as well but on the first floor. At this point we were both freaked out and left. When we got out of the building and met back up with the rest of my family, my mother was fucking pissed and claimed we had been in the building for nearly an hour and that my father hadn't answered any of her calls. We were sure it hadn't been more than 15 minutes, but sure enough an hour had passed. This instance was fairly benign, and I promise later events get much weirder and spookier. It's more just an example of the stories most families have surrounding Colonial Williamsburg. I'm going to eat. I'll be back up in about an hour to continue if the thread is still up. Thanks for bumping an interest. I should be able to bang out the rest now, so bear with me. Second occurrence was realistically a Nothingburger, but still scared the fuck out of me at the time. Neighborhoods in the suburban South are mostly new developments of tightly packed homes with a central clubhouse or pool or something. They suck if you want any privacy or to own land, but they're great if you're a family with kids because you'll be surrounded by other families with kids. Plenty going on and you can just dump your kids outside without having to worry about much. I lived in one of these neighborhoods. On the bus ride home one day an older kid was telling me and my friend about this supposedly haunted place called the Sawmill, that was only a couple miles from our neighborhood. We grabbed supplies after the bus dropped us off and made our way to the sawmill with the older kid as our guide. This place was in some relatively deep woods that surrounded our neighborhood, and admittedly we got lost as fuck. After about an hour of romping around the woods we came upon a clearing and could see the outline of a large, warehouse-type building. Upon entering the clearing, the clouds opened up on us with the fervor of a beer-fueled piss. Because of this we agreed to leave. In reality we were all super scared and didn't want to be murdered by whatever demon lived in the sawmill. We jogged back to our neighborhood, and I vividly remember feeling like I was being watched the entire time. The second we returned to civilization, the rain stopped, which justified my feeling that we should not be there. Turns out the place was a pretty active homeless camp that ended up getting busted up by the police. I assume, as it was abandoned by the time I went back in high school. The sawmill was actually quite cozy and me and my friends would regularly get high there. Like I said, it was a Nothingburger. The last text box bugged out for me and wouldn't let me continue typing, so the picture of cookout was supposed to be for this story. We've reached high school, which is where the good stuff starts happening, but the early expeditions into the unknown did not yield much. To establish our cast, all of the following events include members of my very tight friend group. 8 guys in total, and I still talk to most of them regularly if not daily. The first place we went to was an abandoned building, bank or motel, I can't remember which, that was behind the cookout on the edge of town. This was really stupid, as it was a known hangout for homeless addicts. Luckily we weren't accosted by any dope fiends and just dicked around trying to get inside for an hour or so. Pick related is Crawford Bridge. It was either on the edge of Williamsburg or Yorktown, cannot remember which and can't be fucked to look it up. This place is spooky as fuck but popular, which really reduces the spook factor. Allegedly some woman and her child were lynched here sometime following the war. If you parked under the bridge and turned your car off for a minute or two, handprints would show up all of the exterior. We went there 3 times. One time a single handprint showed up, but honestly I never felt anything super malevolent in this place, and because there were always a bunch of normie ghost hunters there we stopped going once we had found better places. Another instance, we parked at the bridge and explored the woods, fields surrounding the area. It was a nearly moonless night and foggy as fuck, so we got lost to an impressive degree. Not crazy, but I was quite uncomfortable in a certain field that had a hill overlooking it. Constantly felt like I was being watched. Alright, sorry for lame stories so far, I just want to be comprehensive. Next post we'll get into the good stuff. I'm going to snag some satellite photos and do some paint magic to assist in describing stuff, so give me a bit. Alright, we're finally good stuff. These events happened in my junior and senior years of high school. Eastern State Mental Hospital was the first mental institution in the United States. It has gone through many periods of closure and rebuilding. Currently it is partially opened, but a large section was entirely abandoned in the 70s, I believe. Date could be wrong, but it's unimportant. I've attached a poorly labeled map as a reference. There were alleged patient mistreatments in the past, including abuse and lobotomies. Really all the good stuff. Everyone in town agrees that it's haunted as fuck, and it is terrifying at night. Initially, my friends and I broke into the building labeled early visits. We entered the side facing the woods through a window we forced open. The interior of the building is in terrible condition and quite dangerous. Ceiling panels fall, there's broken glass everywhere, and the walls all have asbestos in them. Nothing too significant happened in here, although I have heard voices and whisperings throughout the building that 2 of my friends confirmed also hearing. We mostly just stole stuff and set off fire extinguishers in there as our fear quickly subsided following our first couple of visits. The building labeled church on the map was a large structure that resembled a church, but we were not sure if it actually was. It took us many attempts to gain entry to this one, but eventually we managed to force a door open. This building was our introduction to an odd trend in Eastern State: the juxtaposition in levels of decay inside of buildings. The interior of the building was in pristine condition. There were even papers with employee records and newspapers that remained intact. Not much happened in this building either, and we only entered once. Finally going out of order, but I figured I would continue on the trend of buildings in good condition. One night me and 2 others were traipsing throughout the property. Forgot my map and 4chan won't let me post the original because it was too big. Instead of names, the buildings are marked with the order I've spoken about them, will speak about them. I jokingly tried the doorknob of one of the buildings we previously had attempted to get into. To our surprise, it opened without resistance, and we excitedly entered. This building, like the church, was untouched on the inside. Unlike the church, this building had previously held patients. The atmosphere inside was incredibly oppressive, as all the surfaces inside were white and devoid of dust or mold, the norm for these buildings. The building itself was a single level. The door we entered through opened to a long hallway with rooms where the patients were kept on either side. We would call this building the children's ward, as there were drawings and scrawlings on the walls and tack boards throughout the rooms which appeared to have been done by children. I wish we had explored this one more, but between the state of the building, the drawings, and the threat of being locked in the building should the door not open again, we were all quite freaked out and left within half an hour. This building is not marked on the map. I cannot find it on Google Earth. I'm going to cover encounters we had with security, the police now, as I want to save the events of Building 4 for last. For the record, my friends and I were incredibly cautious when on the property. The last thing any of us wanted was to get arrested. Because of this, we had a set of rules, which honestly just amounted to always staying with the group, never pointing flashlights anywhere except the floor to avoid shining them outside of windows, not using flashlights outside, and, in the event that we were seen, some fuck shit went down, bolting in different directions and meeting at a classy strip mall called Newtown that was a few miles away. The first encounter we had was in building number 4, which I've attached a photo of. I'm going to skip describing the building because I want to save that for describing the things we experienced in the building. We were on the second floor and noticed multiple flashlights shining through the windows. As a result, we promptly dipped and fled to the woods, from where we watched figures scouting around the building. Realistically, these guys were just security. Events similar to this started happening often near the end of our senior year, and culminated in the next described encounter. The second run we had was incredibly odd, and the last time we went to Eastern State. At this point, we were pretty apprehensive of any criminal trespass due to an unrelated encounter with police where we were almost arrested and security being beefed up on the property. We had been on the property for less than 10 minutes, and were making our way down the road to Building 1, pictured on the ghetto ass map above. The abandoned section was at a lower elevation than the active section, and as a result, once you made your way there, you could not see any activity coming down the roads in your direction. It was an incredibly dark night, and we noticed the flash of headlights on the hill behind us. We figured it was just someone passing through, as the chances of security already being alerted were incredibly slim. However, the headlights grew alarmingly bright as they barreled down the hill at us, and we ran into the woods south of the road and were separated. I went prone about 10 feet into the tree line to watch the vehicle, which was a truck with a large searchlight mounted in the bed, that was being manned by some, assumedly, security guard. The truck went further down the road to where my friends had entered the woods. I began making my way through the woods towards Newtown, and eventually met up with a friend I'll call Clyde. I was incredibly relieved to have found him, as being in the woods alone at night is terrifying, especially when you're being hunted by security at an abandoned mental hospital. Clyde and I slowly made our way towards the nearest main road so we could get to Newtown without trespassing further. A few hundred feet into the woods, Clyde stopped and motioned for me to look at something. I scanned the gaps in the trees in front of me, and noticed a large figure standing still, presumably looking back at us. I called out to the person, thinking it was someone from our group. The person responded by taking out a large flashlight and aiming it at us, at which point we both booked it. Thankfully, we made it out of the woods and were able to reach Newtown and meet the rest of our group. The actual paranormal shit that happened will be in the next one. Thanks for reading this far if you are. Building 4 has a long history. All of the information I know concerning it is hearsay, although I'm sure there are articles that could give you a thorough history of the building. John Galt, the doctor who ran the place for a while, died there due to an overdose and still walks the grounds at night. It burned down at least once, but I want to say it happened twice, and was rebuilt. Allegedly a number of people died in the fires, but I am not sure. Our first venture into the building was incredibly tense, as we had to shimmy along the white ledge below the windows you see in the picture a few posts back. This caused us to take nearly half an hour to get into the building, and if anyone fell there would almost certainly be broken legs. The interior of the building was similar to the first one we entered, in that it was rotting. Unlike the first building, there were significantly more things left in this building. Beds, records, cleaning and maintenance supplies, and some old medical equipment lay strewn about. We cautiously made our way through the building, going up to the third floor and onto the roof to make sure we were alone initially, and then into the basement. In the basement we found a busted window which we would use for future entrances, exits. On this initial visit, I am certain that I heard laughing coming from somewhere deeper in the building, and two of my friends later confirmed hearing the same. Despite a general feeling of unease, nothing too bad happened to us during our initial trips. Because of this we grew very confident in our ability to traverse Eastern State. One night a group of 4 of us entered the building through the window we found on our first trip. The group included me, and friends I will call Smith, SV, Kevin. As I stated, at this point we had been in all of the main buildings dozens of times and were very confident in our knowledge of the layout and everything inside. We were going from room to room looting whatever stupid shit we could find, and SV picked up a long metal rod, will be important later. We worked our way to the middle of the basement, at which point Smith called out to us, saying he had found a long hallway. I questioned this, as we had thoroughly explored all the buildings at this point and had never seen this hallway, but sure enough he was correct. The hallway was deep enough that our shitty flashlights could not reach the end of it, so we began making our way down it. The hallway was odd in a number of regards. First in that it was on a noticeable downward slope, which we had not experienced in any other building. Second, it was completely barren. And third, in that once we got about 50 feet in we realized it had flooded slightly. Despite this we continued on, as the water was only to about ankle height at its deepest. After minutes of walking, we reached a point where our flashlights could hit the end of the path. We froze in place as we saw a figure at the end of the hallway, and as soon as we snapped out of our initial fear, turned and sprinted back to the beginning of the hall. We reached the doorway and stopped to catch our breath. We confirmed what each of us had seen, and decided that someone must have set up a mannequin to scare people. Because of this, we turned and made our way back through the hallway, until we reached the same point as before. The figure was facing away from us, staring straight at the wall in front of it, and had not moved an inch since we last saw it. It had long hair and was dressed in a shirt and paints. After a minute or two of staring, SV spoke up and yelled, "If you don't move I'm gonna hurl this javelin, shitty metal rod, at you." The figure responded by turning 90 degrees at an inhumanly fast rate and crawling into the wall. At this point we ran from the hallway all the way back to our car, which was easily 2 miles away. This was easily the most intense fear I've experienced in my life, and if I go the rest of my life without matching it I will be a happy man. The next week we got our whole group together and headed back. We made our way to the end of the hallway again, and found that the figure had crawled into a small tunnel. Being dumb and adventurous, we climbed in single file and made our way on hands and knees. What we found was a tunnel system that went on for at least a mile, and connected many of the abandoned buildings to one another. Sadly, we were unable to explore it in as much depth as we would have liked to, as the truck encounter happened a few weeks after this and we decided to stop exploring as we would graduate soon. In total, Williamsburg is a fantastic place to live and raise a family, but there are an innumerable amount of oddities and paranormal spots throughout the town. Thanks for reading. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
So was the tunnel just a hand-dug dirt thing? Did it ever open up large enough to where you could stand or walk normally?
The tunnel was probably about 2 feet by 2 feet and was made of brick and mortar. It didn't open up. It would just lead to ladders into other buildings.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember that all videos have been archived on the Odyssey page.